Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. Juve, Abaluba yeah, yeah, Abaluba yeah, Abaluba. King gang 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 is Juve. King gang 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 is Juve. Spirit rise come to touch the sun. Darkness pass and the morning come. We done pay homage to we ancestors. We done do the ritual for the libation. So we call in the warriors to stand on guard to protect and preserve this tradition. As we fill each heart, every hollow drum with love. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. The rhythm comes and you run. The warriors coming down. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. The rhythm comes and you run. The warriors coming down. King gang 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 is Juve. King gang 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 is Juve. Iron and steel set ablaze to the dawn. No reason to shelter or run from the storm. The drum call anointing every move we make. The rhythm commanding blood and mind to awake. You can't help but answer this clarion call. Not one man must stumble, not one must fall. Unmasking the spirit, come one, come all, with love. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning come. The rhythm comes and you run. The warriors coming down. Awake, warriors awake, Juve morning.
Hello and welcome to the Bub Report. This week, we observe and commemorate Women's History Month. Notwithstanding the progress women made globally, they are hard-pressed to navigate some complex barriers. For example, 1 in 3 women will experience gender-based violence in their lifetimes. Women are still paid less than men for the same work, and they do 2.6 times more unpaid care and domestic work. In many countries, women do not have equal access to land, credit, or economic and educational opportunities, so that when disaster strikes, women tend to suffer the most. Women's voices in developed and developing countries continue to be silenced amid pervasive discrimination and violence, said Muni Akram, President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council.
Despite considerable progress since the Beijing conference, women's voices often continue to be silenced and their participation in public life obstructed. Meanwhile, discrimination and violence against women remains pervasive. The serious and persistent obstacles which impede women's empowerment include armed conflicts, foreign occupation, terrorism, natural disasters, pandemics, climate change, the feminization of poverty, discrimination and violence, and the lack of equal access to health, education, training, and employment.
The ECOSOC chief declared that sustainable development is not possible if women continue to be marginalized. He called for there to be a new global compact for women's empowerment and eliminating all forms of violence against women and girls. Also on the report, we continue the conversation on the tensions between tourism and the environment in an increasingly changing Caribbean. Some experts suggest that developing countries like Grenada are engaging in over-tourism. More critically, mounting socio-ecological pressures are compounded by increasing climate change and enduring social vulnerabilities, thereby challenging traditional policies and paradigms of growth and sustainability. We expand the tourism ecology conversation outwards with a panel that includes representation from Dominica and Jamaica respectively. We welcome our guests, Jane Ivy Pearl Nurse and Fayan Lawrence, sustainability specialists from Grenada, environmental activist Arthurton Martin from Dominica, younger Travis Martin of the Orakaseba Foundation of Jamaica, and Dr. Jean Augustine, the first Black woman elected to the Canadian House of Commons in Toronto, Canada. Thank you for joining us for another episode. Good morning to everyone and welcome to the Bub Report. And as we close Women's History Month for 2021, we here at the Bub Report salute all women whose contributions sometimes go unnoticed. They are pioneers who lead the way for female empowerment. We see them every day in your homes and in our communities, working tirelessly and often with little recognition. They are frontline workers, business owners, officers, teachers, mothers, and domestic workers. They are your neighbors and co-workers. They challenge expectations, stand on the front lines of change, and refuse to be silent. Also, I want to take this opportunity to extend my deepest condolences to the Presentation Brothers College alumni family in Grenada and around the world on the passing of Emery Spencer, who is a graduate of the class of 1998. I personally remember Mr. Spencer, Emery Spencer at PBC as being a very astute and intelligent schoolmate with great ambition and drive. May he rest in peace and may his memory be a blessing. And now let me take this opportunity to welcome my first guest, Dr. Jean Augustine. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be on the Bub Report.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be with you as we end this very special month.
Absolutely. Dr. Augustine, so I would begin. And, when we think of women, we think of a lot of the informal jobs that women do. And your history as a woman and your trajectory, if you will, when you immigrated to Canada from Grenada, your first job it was as a domestic worker. Yes?
It was a very special program at the time.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back in history, and Kellen, you will find me doing what is called a Sankofa in my answers. That is going back to reach the information to bring forward. Growing up in Happy Hill, St. George's, Grenada, going to Happy Hill Primary School, Mother Rose School, as St. Louis School was called at the time, and then St. Joseph's Convent, and leaving the convent with what I consider to be high qualification at the time, Oxford and Cambridge Overseas School Certificate, A levels, and all of that, and at the same time, very little opportunity for employment. And so that Canadian program was a program to assist the Caribbean islands, many of them, with young women, giving them an opportunity to come to Canada to work in the home of a Canadian family for 1 year, and after that 1 year to get landed immigrant status and remain in Canada. So I took that opportunity. I was one of 9 women that was the quota assigned to Grenada at the time, and came to Canada, worked in the home of a Canadian family, taking care of a 9-month-old baby. And that was my beginning in Canada, doing what is called domestic work, or being a nanny or a household help.
And you moved from the help, if you will, the household help, to be the first Black woman to be elected to the Canadian House of Commons. That must have been a significant accomplishment for you.
Well, it is a significant. It is significant simply because there was. Remember that African Canadians, Black people, have been in Canada since 1603, and that I would be the first woman to enter the House of the first Black woman to enter the Parliament of Canada. So what those 400 or more years of Black involvement, Black people's contribution to Canada, Black people being part of Canadian society, the need for the full participation of everyone in the political process and in other processes in Canadian society had to be looked at, and looked at very seriously. So when I was asked after years as an educator in the school system here, classroom teacher, vice principal, principal, having had my my University of Toronto first and my master's in education, University of Toronto, all of my teacher training, etc., having the opportunity to sit on various corporate boards and participating in many of the, as an activist and advocate, on many issues that call for the full integration of everyone in the society, and pushing on the fact that if we are a mosaic, if we are a multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society, then each and every one of us should be allowed, not allowed, but should be able to participate fully in the society. And so when I was asked to run by one of the political parties, I did, I hesitated, because women don't say I want to run. It was not in my path. Actually, when I left Grenada, I was, looking for post-secondary education and doing something for myself. But when I decided that, yes, I was going to run, I made sure that it was a winnable riding, because oftentimes women are placed in ridings that's not winnable. And at the same time, I took the opportunity to do what was important and necessary: form teams, raise monies, make sure that the party platform was according to my own beliefs and ideological positions, etc., etc. And so it was a big thing when I was elected the first Black woman. Actually, not only the people in my riding or my constituency who felt that they had sent me to Ottawa, but I think every Black person in Canada felt that they had a hand in getting me to Ottawa.
So it was about that village influence as well. But let us segue into the status of women in the 21st century.
Yes.
One of our viewers, he makes the point that the marginalization of women is a reducing phenomenon in his part of the world, at least. Women are actually doing exceedingly well in all spheres of life and professions, and that is a good thing. But let us reflect on where women are in 2021 versus where they were at the time when you immigrated to Canada and served in a cabinet that was mostly male dominated.
Well, I was a minister responsible for the status of women, Secretary of State for the status of women. It's important for me to talk about Canada because I know that best in terms of the progress of women. 50 years ago, we set up a commission on the status of women. The commission went around the country and came back with about 167 recommendations. Recommendations in various fields. The discussion around equal pay, pay equity, maternity leave, child care, issues around birth control and reproductive health, pension reforms, access to education, the need for women to hold managerial positions, the issue of women's ability to be in every sector and structure in the boardrooms of the nation, etc., etc. And those recommendations over the years have created a number of changes in Canadian society and have enabled women in Canadian society. One of the things that happens in Canadian society is and we take pride that we lead the world with a forceful legislative framework of laws and policies and procedures to ensure women's equity and women's place in the society. And so the discussion still goes on in terms of where women are, not only in terms of women in the workplace, women in the marketplace, the laws, the justice system, the socioeconomic situation, but the discussion continues. And Canadian women see themselves very much as advocates and activists around the situation of women, not only in Canada, but women around the world.
And what are some of the deficits? What are some of the areas that still need, attention and improvement?
Childcare is a big one, because if you want women in the workplace and you want to ensure that women are able to be the nurturers and caregivers that they are, then you have to ensure that that childcare is an important one, except for one province, the province of Quebec, that has what could be called a model childcare. The rest of the country, the province where I live, sending your child into daycare or childcare can take almost 2/3 of what you're making out in the workplace. And so until we deal with that issue, we're at the point now where the pandemic has affected women, have affected the caregivers. We know the faces of folks who are affected by the pandemic. The faces of women, and the faces are minority and Black women. So there are a lot of conversations and discussions now as we go forward. What we do about compensation, what we do about childcare, what we do about the pay and for the service as caregivers, etc. So right now we have a lot bubbling in the society as to how we can move forward with the realization and the recognition of what the pandemic, the anti-Black, the systemic discrimination, the Black Lives Matter conversations. This is all bubbling now, and it is a hope that as we go forward, we'll see some of the issues around women's role in the political in the political arena, parties opening up for critical mass of women as candidates, corporate boardrooms now looking at who is sitting at the boardroom tables and looking at the pipeline that would lead to women getting their places, because we had at one point in time just about 6 or 7 provinces where there were women as premier of the province, and we noticed that we've lost those opportunities, and so we see women reaching certain heights, and then for other things in the society, kind of losing that impetus to get women moved in every section and every sector of the society. The issue of pay and equal pay is one again that the conversation is and the policy directions are all leading to what we must do in that area. At the same time, there is always the discussions among political parties whether they'll open up the issue of abortion or whether we have more or less spoken to the issue of reproductive health, and there is understanding that we all agree, and why do we need to, to go back to that discussion? But we know that this is something that pops up every so often. So women's place in the marketplace as entrepreneurs, and what we can do during this pandemic time. The government has put quite a bit of money to assist small businesses, and we know that women are mainly in those small businesses, the hairdressing salons, the small corner stores. Women are there, and it's important that as women get into and become more engaged with the small entrepreneurial, that they get that support that's needed. So those are the conversations that are taking place. Where are we heading? And now that we know the importance of women as essential workers in our society, as caregivers, when we know the facts. I mean, the issue of violence against women, we've had, this is a discussion that seem to not bring the kind of results that we expect, despite severe laws about stalking legislation, about rape, around abuse. That carries on. And this pandemic, we had a number of women who were killed by intimate partners and by others. And so we see this violence against women in the society carrying on despite measures, despite laws. And so places like women's shelters, programs that support women when they have to leave the home. And of course, we know that in the pandemic, we've not been able to sustain that kind of activity and support as we should, because women find themselves confined with partners in this pandemic period when we are in lockdown.
And finally, Dr. Augustine, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you are 83, yes?
Yes, I was born September 9, 1937.
You're also a September born. I'm also a September born as well.
Great.
So I guess we age well, if you will.
The good Grenadian soil.
The Grenadian soil, yes. But on a personal note, how do you maintain? You have a very busy schedule, and so you stay busy. I can tell. How do you, in retirement, manage to keep active and to stay going?
Well, I keep active simply because people like yourself call me and get me engaged. I usually don't go knocking at doors or putting anything out there saying I want to become engaged.
Mhm.
But since I have been over 60 years or so, I have been engaged with community. I've been engaged on so many different levels, whether it's education, whether it's curriculum writing, whether it is with arts and the artists who are, making progress and moving forward at this point in time, important in our community, or with religious and church groups. I am always called upon to participate, to, as they would say in Grenada, to add my 2 pennies worth to issues. And I mentor. I do a lot of mentoring of young women, because I think some of the things that occurred in my time coming up, as it were, through systems, I want to make sure that others know what those pitfalls are, know how to develop the skills and the talents and what abilities and how, so I help young women in terms of resume and contacts and connecting and networking with women and women's organizations. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I have a Center for Young Women's Empowerment, and there we teach, we take the young girls from age 17 to 17 From the 7 years old, we talk about nutrition. We do yoga and mindfulness. We do, homework help in a safe environment so that the girls come after school. Not right now, we do everything virtually now, but we provide a safe environment for pretty close to 250 to 300 girls between the ages of 7 and 17. And to walk in there at any point in time for me is always to get a touch of youthfulness and energy.
Mhm. All right. Dr. Augustine, on that note, let me thank you for appearing on the Bub Report today. It's an important month, but it is important to also acknowledge that the work that you do and the work that other women do, and men as well, is important for conversations around ensuring that we can continue advancing gender equality in our world. And we have a comment here from Nicole Brenda Lee Johnson James, who says, Dr. Gustine, congratulations, and continue to take care of yourself and to empower women.
Merci beaucoup.
Yes. Okay, Dr. Gustine, thank you again, and you enjoy the rest of your week.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye. Okay, folks, stand by. We will be right back. We will go to headlines, and we'll be right back with the panel. Stand by.
We wear the mask that grins and lies. It shades our cheeks and hides our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding heart, we smile and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh my God, our tears to thee from tortured souls arise. And we sing, hey, baby, bye. We sing, hey, oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world think otherwise. We wear the mask. When I think about myself, I almost laugh myself to death. My life has been one great big joke, a dance that's walked, a song was spoke. I laugh so hard, I almost choke when I think about myself.
That was the late, great Maya Angelou, reflecting on the struggles of Black women here in the United States of America. And it can also be a metaphor for the state of women around the world as well. And so let me take this opportunity to welcome my very regional panel this morning. We have Mr. Travis Graham. Let me apologize. I believe I mistitled you in the intro. Travis, but I apologize for that. I will make sure and correct that. Let me also welcome Fayan Lawrence, who is in Grenada, as well as Arthurton Martin, who is out there in Dominica, and Jane Nurse, who is also in Grenada. Panelists, welcome. All of you operate within the space of environmentalism, sustainability, sustainable development. And the conversation we're going to have today really surrounds the impact, the ecological impact of the new direction of tourism we're witnessing in the Caribbean region. And I would begin, folks, with a quote, and this is from Alfred Wong. He is a development economist, and Mr. Wong says, quote, tourism has been an important component of Caribbean island economies for more than 3 decades. The business model is based largely on the deployment of low-wage workers in destination surroundings which mimic the post-colonial plantation era. Moreover, mass tourism has resulted in stretching the carrying capacity of some smaller island states to the limiting end, unquote. But he goes on to say, quote, a new strategy to replace classical as well as alternative tourism is urgently needed. And so this is how we're going to frame this conversation today. Travis, I will begin with you in Jamaica. Jamaica has been sort of a mass tourism destination. Um, and so what does sustainability look like in ensuring that you can manage that tension that exists between tourism and ecology? Okay, I think Travis lost the connection there, but I'll go to you, Athi. Actually, he's actually back.
Me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Please
My
proceed.
apologies. Yeah, man,
Yes.
I fully agree. I think Jamaica does employ a mass tourism model, and pre-COVID, our population is close to 3 million. Pre-COVID, in terms of our visitor rate, we're getting close to 4.2 million visitors here, within our local accommodations, plus through our cruise ship industry. And yeah, we have about 400,000 persons who are both directly and indirectly employed within the tourism sector. So the contributions from the tourism sector is huge. It's just a little over 10% of our national GDP. So yes, tourism is one of the leading sectors in Jamaica. For me, I am the executive director for the Arcabesa Foundation. We are a philanthropic arm of a resort, which is Golden Eye Resort, which is, I would say, it's a sustainable, focused resort. It does not really fully utilize a mass tourism model. It's not all inclusive, but it's more on the high end, a luxury destination model. However, I think Jamaica a few years ago did a sustainable tourism study, and it did show that we need to be employing more sustainable strategies to our tourism sector for it to benefit long term. And one of the biggest challenges that we have seen now is the fallout from COVID, and how what I would say our reliance on our three major source markets, US, UK, and Canada, which have been some of the most hardest hit spaces. It has really affected our tourism sector. And though it's not unique to Jamaica, this is a critical time for us to look at how is it that we, evaluate our model, and look at how is it that we move forward. I think sustainability is the key element in terms of how is it that we reshape our sector, for a few reasons. One, we are a small island state. We are surrounded by water, as is the case with many other Caribbean industries, and many of our tourism resources are connected to the environment. We mainly have eco or cultural assets that we provide as attraction elements to the visitors. And what I've realized through studies is that our mass tourism model, to a larger extent, impacts some of these natural resources that actually make us a viable destination. So when we speak about sustainable tourism, it really should be something that we pivot the sector on. And we cannot use the word loosely. Sustainability has to be something that is measurable, something that we evaluate every year, and we ensure that the entities that are there to enforce regulations that ensure that all stakeholders engage in sustainable tourism are held accountable for what it is that they're doing and not doing. So through the Arcabessa Foundation, some of the things that we do to contribute to that outcome, we most of our core programs are surround alternative livelihood, marine conservation, youth engagement. We have perhaps one of the largest coral reef rehabilitation programs on the island. We have coral nurseries. We have planted over 18,000 corals with the intention to plant 100,000 by 2030. Sorry. We also manage a marine protected area, which is a fish sanctuary. And just the concept of the fish sanctuary is really to promote sustainable fishing, because we employ what I would consider to be a ecosystem-based adaptation model, where an important part of our ecological activities are intended to tie in with the community and to be driven by the community. So in our case, all the things that we do as it concerns marine conservation, we do it as a 50-50 partnership with the local fishermen. And this is done within the understanding that for tourism to thrive, more locals have to be engaged and benefit from the tourism value chain. And also the environmental sustainability has to be a very serious component of that model and strategy, because we depend on this resource in order to, continue becoming a viable destination. So sustainability is, we do have good examples of sustainable tourism, sustainable environmental development in Jamaica, but I do dare to say we need to have this as a fulsome national strategy. And I think, our governments have been challenged with, balancing, working with a lot of the multinationals that I would say have a large share in our tourism economy and tourism sector, and balancing that with how is it that we, employ all of these sustainable environmental strategies. And oftentimes the unfortunate reality is that these multinationals end up getting the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, these multinationals end up getting the benefit of the doubt. And in the short term, it seems like it works, but what you realize that long term, our local economies become impacted. We're so tied in, and we're almost a slave to their needs. And some of their practices, unfortunately, impact the environment. And what you don't have is as much enforcement and accountability as we need to ensure that the Caribbean can continue being a sustainable destination for the benefit of locals for generations to come.
Mhm.
And even within that.
Yeah, let me bring in Atherton. Mr. Martin, welcome to the Bub Report. And I would get to you over there in Dominica now. Dominica prides itself as being the nature island of the Caribbean. As a matter of fact, it is one of the most popular destinations in the Eastern Caribbean for nature tourism. But there are some tensions there as well. You've been very vocal against this new tourism thrust in Dominica. So I want you to perhaps expand on some of the ideas that Mr. Graham has been raising there in Jamaica. What is happening in Dominica that you're concerned about?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I want to say hi to my fellow panelists. I remember a book that a Jamaican colleague of mine wrote many years ago in the 70s. Most of you might remember George Beckford. He wrote the book Plantation Economy. He said that actually after independence, it seems that the islands have spent much more time attempting to recreate the classic slave plantation model in the way we designed our economies. And he was absolutely correct. Our agriculture became dependent upon single crops, monocrop in cocoa in Jamaica, in Grenada, for example, bananas in the rest of the windwards, and so on, sugarcane. So one by one, we all created plantation economies. And the problem that Beckford was raising is a problem that has matured and has ripened in this time, which is that we tend to view what we do or what we can do in single event phenomena. For example, tourism. We say tourism is it, so we do tourism. and every other sector of the economy is left to play catch up. If you look at the investments in tourism throughout our region over the last 25 years, you will see hundreds of millions of dollars spent creating facilities to service tourism, while facilities that are required to service, let's say, agriculture, food production, required to ensure safe and secure sources of potable water for the population, healthcare systems, education, and so on, pale into insignificance in terms of their budgetary allocations when compared with tourism. So, you know, we make the classic mistake that the plantation owners of the past made, which is they were focused on sugar to the exclusion of all else, including the impact of the sugar plantation and production systems on the natural environment. So that is why in Jamaica, for example, when sugar was king in Jamaica, the runoff from the sugar estates and the sugar plantations in terms of agricultural chemical runoff got into the groundwater and polluted and made it unusable, not just by humans, but by other levels of organisms that were part of the food chain for people in Jamaica, you know, whether it be the crabs and other things that people also ate as wild meat, for example. So it is our uncanny ability to look at life frame by frame that has us in a situation today where, for example, we utilize nature for our tourism product. We utilize beaches, we utilize forests, reefs, we utilize all those things, wildlife, flora, fauna. That becomes part of what we offer, of what we sell to the visitor. But do we invest in maintaining and protecting and enhancing these natural systems? That is not the norm. You find isolated exceptions throughout the Caribbean where people who are making money by marketing natural systems are not making any real contribution to the maintenance and preservation and protection of the systems. So the natural system, which is the core product of tourism, does not receive direct benefits from the tourism industry. But we also have tunnel vision when it comes to the cultural impact of tourism. Cultural including how we relate to our environment. Does the local population value forests, value river systems, value beaches? That's a cultural question. Because if you're not raised as a child, if your school system doesn't reinforce the value of your natural system, you will grow up to be an adult who, as a politician, will be seeking to attract all kinds of investors, even if those investors' actions in your country will destroy the core of the country, its river systems, its forest systems, beach and coastal zone systems. So we have failed to do one of the important things that would have avoided this unfortunate dichotomy between people being made to feel that they either have to choose the economy or the environment, when in fact the environment is the economy. Mm-hmm. And so you will have a situation where you would hear political parties making the case, oh, don't worry about those people, all they want to do is protect trees. They think that trees are more important than people, but we want to grow the economy. We want to get these big hotels and these big cruise ships to come. When in fact, the ultimate purpose and the primary purpose of growing the economy, is it not supposed to be the benefit to those very people?
So, but Mr. Martin, you know, the politicians will say that they have a mandate to provide employment to their constituents and to their population.
Mr. Bob, they have a mandate to ensure the safety and protection of their people. They don't have a mandate to attract investment at the cost of the health of their people, at the cost of the wellness of the elderly, the wellness of the youth, the healthcare system. No. We've allowed them to interpret their mandate in, again, this pillar view, these narrow things. Or we built these roads, or we brought 2 investors here, etc. When in fact, they put our country up for sale. trying to use the country to attract investments, when in fact, what is the country? Do we ask that question? Do we remind them that in fact, long before the investors came, we had water. Now that the investors are here, our water is polluted. So what is the real ecologic cost of your economic investment in tourism? We fail to do that. What's interesting, even the international financial institutions like the World Bank and others have now made the conduct of environmental impact assessment studies a sine qua non requirement for them to consider financing tourism sector plans or tourism private investments. But have we done that at the national level? No. In our angst to compete with each other for what we think are scarce investment dollars, we are actually relaxing on our environmental regulations, relaxing on waste disposal, so hotels can dispose of their sewage wherever they want, dispose of their solid waste anyhow they want. Cruise ships can come here and dump their solid waste into our landfills. And we do those things. In other words, we trade off the wellness, the well-being of our population for what are in fact short-term gains. And who benefits from those so-called investments? I'll tell you who benefits. There's a company called Range Development, which is now trying to do a project in Grenada, which did a project in St. Kitts, which did a project in Dominica. Guess how Range financed its so-called investment? In Dominica, the government provided Range with 800 Dominican passports for them to go and sell. They sold 800 passports to people all over the world. We don't know who they sold them to. They raised 185 million US dollars from the sale of Dominican passports. They built a so-called 5-star hotel in a wetlands. They built that 5-star hotel at a cost of 53 million out of that 185. Two of the primary principals in the Range company walked away from that deal even before the hotel was opened. Each one of them walked away with 30 million US dollars. Each one of them. That same gentleman is now in Grenada doing the same thing, selling Grenadian passports that they did elsewhere in St. Kitts and so on, getting very rich, building a half-ass hotel, and walking away with millions and millions of dollars, having sold the one thing that is supposed to be dear to Black people is who we are, our identity. They took it away once with slavery. Now they're taking it away again with the sale of our passports. And they are the ones who are benefiting. So we need to be really careful. So in the my closing observation, at this point is, unless we in the Caribbean understand that culture, economics, politics, governance, wealth, wellness, and welfare of people are all part of the same package. Unless we understand that we cannot exclude attention to one of these elements of the package while we pursue what we think is the short-term gain, these hotels will not be around for a long time. Where the Kempinski Hotel was built by Range is in the middle of Dominica's largest coastland wetlands area, which guaranteed fisheries for several villages, guaranteed the absence of flooding, and guaranteed enormous biodiversity. We've lost all of that. The hotel is empty, not just because of pandemic, but it's empty because there's no way for them to get visitors into the hotel into Dominica, regardless. So in other words, the failure of ourselves, we are at the core of the problem, not the investors. The investors are coming in to rape and loot. We supposed to be the ones saying, hey, hold on. Here are the terms and conditions under which Dominica will engage you in this critical tourism sector. But you cannot come here and dictate the terms of engagement, get our passports, sell our passports, use the income from the sale of our passports to finance what you are calling your investment and walk away with $60 million? Come on. So that is the model that is here. The only way to change it is for us to sort of get real and realize this is long after the investors are gone. The guy left here, he went to St. Kitts. He left there and he's now in Grenada. So they're picking us off like ripe mangoes, one by one, and they're spitting us out. And our leadership and our private sector and our civil society is collaborating with that rape of the modern plantation in the Caribbean.
Yes, Mr. Martin. Also, let me make the point, and as a disclaimer, we did invite Range Developments, a representative from Range Developments, to appear on the Bub Report. We reached out on several occasions last week to obtain a confirmation from them. They've yet to respond, just as a disclaimer, in the interest of ensuring that we have balance. But let me bring in Jane and Fayan, who are based in Grenada. I want to bring you guys into the conversation because this is a conversation that is being had in Grenada as well in this current moment, in the context of this new tourism, what I would call a mass tourism thrust. Central government frames the argument as wanting to ensure that we can have more room stock on the island, that there is a demand from the global north to ensure that there is enough room stock for passengers. That's how it's framed. But again, based on the conversation we've been having here today, it's about that ecological impact. And so what are you seeing in terms of that ecological impact in Grenada? And how do we go about ensuring that we can mitigate those impacts? Jane or Faye, either one of you can jump in.
Wonderful, thank you. So one of the wonderful things about being on a panel such as this is the level of discourse that we're able to have. But one of the challenges on being on such a panel is that the three previous speakers, but specifically the last two, have covered so much of what needs to be spoken about that I think, can really only expand on it. Mm-hmm. So I think we can start by recognizing that the challenge that we're seeing is that our governments across the region, it seems, themselves undervalue the worth of the island. And so it is to them something that should be sold and can be sold on the cheap because they themselves don't value the natural systems. We are not investing in our local population enjoying those natural systems. And that sort of thinking is clear in how we go into these negotiations with developers.
But central government may say again that, they do have sort of climate resilient projects in place. They frame it under terms such as the blue economy. How do you assess these programs that are meant to manage the tension? I'm going to bring in Jane here. Or what do you guys think about the notions of things like the blue economy, which are supposed to mitigate those environmental impacts that you guys are really working hard to ensure that that mitigation happens?
Kellen, let's step back for a moment. And first of all, thank you for having me on the panel, especially following such distinguished ladies as beforehand. I also want to commend the speakers before me. And let's take out the heat for a second and step back. Let's look at, for instance, the tax base of working Grenadians. And I think the ballpark figure is 15% of working Grenadians pay taxes. Now, why am I bringing that up? Because most people can't actually make enough money to pay taxes to the government, where's the taxes supposed to go to helping us with our infrastructure, public health, conservation, all of those issues. And we are often being told in the context of these developments, they will bring jobs. So the argument of jobs trumps any considerations that are being brought forward. On the other hand, as Mr. Atherton very eloquently explained, all the ecosystem services that the areas provide, in which many of these projects are situated, those are being shoved aside as non-essential, when in the very fact, those are the very systems that keep our people's livelihoods afloat. And now, one of the things that I see as a practitioner, both from a public sector and private sector perspective, and I wouldn't say, oh, blame the investor or blame the government or blame the people. I think going back to the idea of responsibility, it's a collective responsibility to create a system that has checks and balances and provides progress and wellness and well-being along the process. And so sustainability, I see it as a process. You have to continuously work with your stakeholders, with the government and with investors to create a framework in which all those needs are being assessed, whether it's from an ecological perspective, whether it's from a community perspective, whether it's from an economic perspective. So coming back to the argument of jobs, if we're looking at tourism jobs, if a developer comes in and he can say, oh, I have all these millions to spend, 100 millions plus, to build a first-class 5-star hotel in Grenada. And most of the times with these developments is you have a developer, they built a hotel, they walk away, and they're not involved in the running of the hotel. So they don't really care about how many jobs are in the end created or stay in the economy and so on. But from a government perspective and from a community perspective, this is important. We should be asking not just how many jobs, but what kind of jobs. At what level are they going to pay? Are they going to pay at least 3,000 EC plus so people can have a livelihood and pay taxes to the government? Or is it just going to be another 1,000 EC, 1,500, 2,000 EC? And that is being touted as jobs, because those are not jobs that are going to lift people out of poverty. And I think one of the things, coming back to the blue economy idea, yes, the blue economy for Grenada is very important because most of our assets that we're trying to develop at the moment are on the coastlines. And we've also engaged, I think, a while back in a Caribbean challenge where we decided we wanted to preserve at least 25% of our coastal marine spaces. And I think most recently now Grenada has, which is good, we've engaged in a number of sustainable development goals that we want to achieve. And amongst those goals is to, for instance, secure our fish stocks in our coastal areas. And this is, for instance, again, you look at, this is the blue economy in action. Our fishermen right there. So how could, for instance, could you create a balance between the development and livelihoods of local communities? Not every fisherman wants to go and work in a hotel, but they may want to sell to a hotel. So if you go into an area where you want to develop, you're not just going to say, okay, we're going to build a big bunker here where we put 500 rooms so we can have more airlift. You need to look at what other services can this space provide. And all the areas that we're developing, how are we going to put back? So if we're taking down mangroves, right, how is that going to affect our livelihoods for the fishermen? Because they depend on mangroves to provide nurseries for their fish stocks. So these goals that we have, sometimes they seem like they're mutually exclusive when they don't have to be. And oftentimes we frame the debate as one, it's either or, it's either jobs or the environment. Then seeing, as Mr. Atherton said, very, very real, it is that core ecosystem service that nature provides for us that also provides our overall product. Mm-hmm. If we do that by not planning, by not looking at all the needs involved, then you don't have a blue economy. And then whatever we say is literally just lip service. And I think this is something where, and that's the final point I'm going to make, there is sometimes a translation issue. And I see it from a private sector perspective. Even if there's an investor, and it takes a lot for an investor to come and do a project in the Caribbean because it's a lot of resources involved to getting stuff to be done here, right? So I don't want to say investors from abroad are bad. I'm saying, no, this is commendable when people want to come and do projects here. But if they come, we need to be better in asking for more safeguards. We need to ask, how are you going to deal with your waste? What are you going to do about your water? How are you going to do your energy? What kind of jobs and how well are they going to pay? And how do we translate that, right? How easy is it for an investor to find the right standards? And how much is the government actually to pay attention, particularly to large projects? You can't just say we don't have the capacity so you can do it and you can do whatever you want. If you bring large projects in, if you attract those kind of investments, then it's also your responsibility to ensure that standards are set, that standards are followed, that they're monitored. And if you don't have that capacity, make a developer pay for it because they say they have millions to spend.
All right, speaking of millions to spend, I'm going to bring you in, Faye, and do you want to expand on anything Jane just said?
Sure. So just very briefly, I think we have things in place. Grenada has policies in place and frameworks. The National Sustainable Development Plan calls out that sustainable development needs to have the three considerations of is a project good for Grenadians? Is it good for the environment? And is it good for investors? And it is not a zero-sum game. I don't think any right-thinking Grenadian, which are the only kinds that I know, is anti-development, but the development has to be sustainable. So are we investing in our social, environmental, and also gaining the economic benefits of these investments? And the other thing is that Grenada has a sweetness that has been lost in large part because of the kind of projects that we have undertaken and how those projects have, Grenada has a sweetness that in large part has been lost throughout the rest of the Caribbean or a number of other islands. And that has come about as a result of the types of developments those other islands have said yes to, and how that has changed the interaction between the local population and the tourists. There is a naturally building resentment, or there will be a naturally building resentment if you're going to work for 7 EC an hour, out of which taxes are still being taken, and there's no public transportation system in place to get you to and from work, and yet you're going to a 5-star hotel to cater to, in a plantation-like tourism sort of way, tourists who are not getting out of the 5-star resort because they have everything they need at their disposal to see the island and to enjoy what we are actually about, which is the people, those interactions that you can still have, that you can't have in a lot of developed countries anymore, because people don't want to interact. And we need to recognize what it is that makes Grenada special, and these other islands as well, before they are lost there completely. And demand it, even, not even ask it of developers who we do want to attract. But how many 5-star hotels does an island need, especially if other islands who have the infrastructure to already accommodate the mega yachts, etc., if they already have them throughout the Northern Caribbean, why are we also trying to replicate that here in Grenada to the detriment of our environment and our people? And we are not reinvesting any of those dollars that we are supposedly getting, because again, the process is quite opaque, so we don't know where they're actually going or what they're being used on. But we're not seeing the reinvestment in our infrastructure, in our highways, that, part of one of our main roads is falling into the ocean through erosion. And so now we're just cutting the highway through a residential neighborhood, which has its effects on that neighborhood, whether the children can walk to school or go and visit their family as they have always done, if it's safe to let your children and your pets play outside. I mean, again, we've got to recognize the value of what we have in the islands. There's the saying that we live where you vacation. And it's because people already want to come here. We're not saying that tourism isn't important, but if we don't balance it with reinvestment in our society and our environment, then one, we remain at the mercy of something like this pandemic, where all our eggs are in one basket, and now we are struggling because this is all we have invested in for decades. And two, at some point, what people want to come and see will only be the beaches, because the people who leave their poor-paying jobs and can't afford to build a house of their own with the money they're making in these hotels and other developments that make no sense, are not going to be welcoming or as welcoming anymore. There are knock-on effects that we must recognize. And it's not that we don't already have the frameworks in place to focus on these things, but we are focusing on the economic to the detriment of the social and the environmental across the Caribbean.
And Travis, let me bring you back here because in the Okasiba Bay, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, your foundation is named after that bay. And as I understand it, your foundation, you've had to engage in sort of ecological restoration, if you will. Yes. So I just want you to step back a bit and tell us why that restoration was needed. Is it because of the encroachment of tourism projects that resulted? Because I understand it's also sort of an endangered marine sanctuary.
Well, yes, it's Aracabessa Bay, and it's located on the north coast. And our marine conservation program was really driven by by just the ecological realities, right? One, I know in the 1980s we had a huge issue with the diadema urchins, one of the most consistent reef feeders, and many of them were wiped out, not just in Jamaica and the Caribbean. And what you realize with that and the development that we saw coming in from the 80s, just the reef health in Jamaica, as well as other spaces in the Caribbean, would have been impacted, and we're still feeling the effects of it now. Right? Also, the Caribbean is one of the most overfished regions globally, and then we have the impact of climate change, which causes bleaching effects on our corals, not just in Jamaica but in the Caribbean, and then the continued developments associated with tourism. So what that shows is that there have been a number of stressors on our environment, and as the foundation, as many other organizations are and should be doing, we have to take a proactive approach in terms of how is it that we are going to contribute to a positive change in these areas, and more importantly, to create a culture of environmental stewards among the persons through knowledge, that we can have persons be more informed on what are the issues affecting our environment, and to change their attitude so it can impact behavior. So yeah, 10 years ago we partnered with the government to start the Aracabessa Bay Fish Sanctuary, which is a marine protected area. We're one of 18 around the island, but what makes us unique is that we include the fishermen as an important stakeholder, and one of the things is to ensure that they understand the importance of sustainable fishing, with sustainability being that keyword. We do engage in coral reef rehabilitation, and in 2019 we started a dive shop, and the dive shop was started as a social enterprise, with the profits from the dive shop basically funding our coral reef rehabilitation program. So we look at ourselves as a stakeholder in terms of practicing sustainable blue economy. And it is important that sustainable be added to the word, because you have entities that interact with the ocean that will be a part of the blue economy sector, but they are not practicing sustainably. And we see where it has been impacting the local environment. So even though we have signed the Paris Agreement, even though we subscribe to the Sustainable Development Goals, one of our biggest issues for me as a region is leadership. And how is it that we utilize our collective power of a region to determine how is it that we navigate our region for the upcoming generations? And leadership is important. So when I've read books like The Economic Hitman, written by John Perkins, he speaks about the global corporatocracy that really runs the world and helps to shape economic plans of developing countries. And I would say tourism may be seen as that, where I would say tourism is basically run by what we call the global distribution system, which is run by multinationals, which basically dictate how our regions strategize in terms of tourism development. And while it has been bringing money in our region, it is not a sustainable economy, because COVID has shown that we are very vulnerable. And what it has also shown is that a lot of the funds that we have been boasting that we have been receiving from tourism are actually going to multinationals, and the trickle down effect is very small to our locals. So we have to put the environment at the forefront because of our region and how vulnerable we are as a region, and the fact that whatever happens, we still have to stay here, we still have to survive, we still have to live here. So we not just have to subscribe to these international policies, but we have to localize them, and we have to connect them to deliverables. We have to connect them to measurable outputs, measurable outcomes. So we're not just saying, yeah, man, we're subscribing to the Sustainable Development Goals. What of the 17 goals are we subscribing to? What is it that we are doing and holding ourselves accountable to show that we are contributing to these particular goals? And what are the policies that we are holding our leaders accountable to ensure that we are protecting our regional resource. And I think it is important for Caribbean leaders now to see that as a Caribbean, we have 20 countries represented in CARICOM. We have a huge voice globally, and we have to ensure that we stand up for the region and ensure that we protect future generations to come and put environment at the forefront of those strategies.
Mr. Graham, on that note, you've brought us to a point where we need to come up for air, take a break, and we will come back and wrap up this very important discussion. Folks, stand by. We'll be right back.
So our mission since the past 10 years of patrolling and protecting this area, our Rockabessa, called the Rockabessa of the Sisters Sanctuary, is a view long coming. We recognize that we're losing our fishes, and then the only place to take something from is the sea, and they didn't putting in things. But it's a no-take zone, it's a no-fishing zone, and that should be instructed or told to them by the operators of the pillar. So we could effect a charge through the pillar, and so me and other partners decided to give up a space called the sanctuary. So we did that since the past 10 years, and we achieved extreme good result. But at this time now, we see it looking not too bright as the government have no more funding to assist in keeping it going. We have an operation cost nearly 20 million a year, which is supposed to be operated properly for our sanctuary. We just make this work, but we need a lot more resources.
All right, folks, welcome back. That was a clip from the Jamaica Gleaner about the Rakisabé Foundation and the work that you guys do over there in Jamaica. But as we conclude, because at the end of the day, folks, you would acknowledge that central governments, government policy, they talk about consultation, they talk about checking those boxes, and one of those boxes is consulting with folks like yourself. And so, to what extent do you think that these consultations bear any fruit? Is it relevant if they are still going to continue with the trajectory that they continue to proceed with? And I will start with you, Jane. Yes.
I know I'm itching with this one.
Yeah.
No, but I strongly believe in consultation. And I've been sitting in many consultations over the last few months. Some run very well, others not so well. And what you see in the consultation is that if it is done well, you realize that it's an asset. It will make a project stronger, particularly from a government perspective where you have lack of capacity and expertise or implementation. If you can tap into the local expertise that does exist, or even amazing expertise around. Consultations, they help you unearth that quality of people if the consultations are done in a genuine manner. And I think that's a trick we miss over and over again, that we do the consultations just as a performer, or as a tick box exercise because the World Bank and the IMF or whoever told us to do so, without recognizing the qualitative difference it makes if we facilitate a consultation constructively, not just and I can see it. It's not always a nice experience, especially from a government perspective. You sometimes sit in a room and people are just being angry, right? Because they haven't been involved early on. And I think we can change that culture if we recognize that constructive critique isn't something negative, but it's something to be actively looked for, searched for, invited. And it will make a project stronger, because then this is the area where you shouldn't build. This is the area maybe you can build, but under certain conditions. This is the area where you can build under certain conditions with the help of the community you're trying to serve. And if you don't do that adequately, if you don't take people serious and respect them in that process, you get that kind of loggerhead attitude and you're missing out. Then yes, it takes longer. Yes, it can be cumbersome, but ultimately in the long run, it's the most sustainable pathway. And I see that comment thrown around on the internet sometimes, on lots of articles pertaining to environmental issues in Guinea. We need to get out of our third world mentality, but mostly said in a way of, we shouldn't argue about the environment. We should just build whatever we can. and not recognizing that if we want to raise the standard of living, of quality, of well-being for everyone, we have to put in place systems. We have to follow these standards. We have to implement and insist on these procedures. And sometimes that's uncomfortable and it's not easy. I know as a sustainability practitioner, it takes a lot of effort to do it right, but in the end, you get a better result. And that's something we need to keep in mind and keep insisting on over and over and over again.
Let me bring in Fayan. Fayan, same question to you.
So well said, Jane. The local expertise exists to make these consultations useful. But as Jane said, the consultations must not be performative if we expect them to have genuine outcomes. It can't be that we're just calling a bunch of people in a room to check that box to say, as a developer, I've done this, and so I'd like to break ground now. Really, what we need is transparency from the developers, from any developer, regardless of what they're building. Where are you digging? Have you done an environmental impact assessment? Why is that not readily available? We need that transparency so that the consultations can be useful. The existing experts in the room, we don't have to necessarily call in foreign experts. So much of our talent already exists here. But the concern is that when the talent steps into the room, it will derail the project. And to Jane's point, that is not the intention of consultations. That should not be the intention of consultations. So transparency from the developers, accountability from the government, because as I said, all of these frameworks already exist, and that is part of the frustration, that it's not that these plans don't already exist and we have a vision for the sustainable development of Grenada. It's that no one is being held accountable to ensure that the framework is being stuck to. And then, as we're talking about the consultations, we need oversight from the citizens, and that oversight should be welcomed because citizens want the country to develop. It is how we get to the next level in terms of building schools and hospitals and the education of our population, but it can't be to the detriment of our soil. In fact, that good Grenada soil that Dr. Augustine referenced before, it can't be to the detriment of that soil that makes us look, ageless at the age of 83. We need to recognize the value of that.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that metaphor and the way that you weaved it into the conversation. Travis, I will bring you in. The same question. Now, Jamaica, obviously, they've had sort of a running start with respect to their tourism product and what it looks like over there. And I'm sure those tensions that are inherent in Dominica, in Grenada, have already been adjudicated, if you will, in Jamaica. So in terms of the work that you do with your foundation, what sort of, I guess, communication buy-in do you get from the policymakers there?
We do get communication buy-in to an extent. And as I said before, while there are a lot of very good best practices in and around Jamaica, I would say we have to be cultured to approach our policy implementation at a national level, where it is something that we do straight across the board. And I think that is the general challenge, where we may have very good indicators sparsely spread. However, we do have policies that speak to how we should be shaping our environmental and tourism sectors nationally. But as I said, the issue has been leadership over the decades. And this is not tied to any specific political party, but it is really about having the political will to maintain a particular standard within the context of the international sector and what the demands of these multinationals are. So yes, we do have a regional population of about 40 million persons with close to 227 million visitors coming here on an annual basis throughout the Caribbean, and we are dependent on possibly 3 major source markets: US, Canada, and the UK, right? And many of these destinations, they buy into the mass tourism model, and we have basically tied our society to these models. However, we have missed a very, very important opportunity to diversify our model, right? And utilize it to attract other source markets such as Asia and the Eastern Pacific, Africa, and other areas that are more interested in heritage, cultural, and environmental tourism. And I think we are basically responding to what the market is asking for, not realizing that it has a debilitating effect on our society over a period of time. So we have to really know what we want as a Caribbean sector, and we really have to collectively hold our regional governments accountable for the road that we are going on and the impact that it will have on our sustainable economies going forward. So yes, there are good examples of what's going on, but it has to be straight across the board. It has to be a philosophy in how we treat economic development in the Caribbean. And it has to be measurable indicators that shows that we are actually utilizing sustainable strategies to protect our people, to protect our environment, and to push our economies forward in a very sustainable way. It has to be across the board. And we have to stand up to these multinationals in the interest of our regional countries.
Folks, we will take one more break and we will come back to get closing comments from the panel. Stand by.
Since losing that seat, what have you been up to?
Now, Mr. Attorney General, this particular provision sounds unconstitutional. But why were there not consultations before moving forward with the proposals? Did they say what will happen when you guys get to St. Vincent? Because there are pressing socio-economic issues that I would want to address with you.
In the hyper-information age of social media, the Bub Report knows there is more to the story. We have questions and demand answers. We strive to hold the powerful accountable and tell an unbiased, contextual story. You know what happened. We let you know why it happened. There is always more to the story. The Bub Report, streaming every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube. All right, folks, welcome back. This is a very deep discussion. I think some of the viewers are calling for us to do a part 2 of this discussion, which I think is necessary. It is important to also to hear from the other side, as we always strive to ensure that we have balance here on the Bub Report. And so, as I said, we did invite some of the developers in Grenada. We have not heard back from them. We also attempted to reach out to the Member of Parliament for St. Patrick East, Honorable Pamela Moses. She has not responded to our invitation either. As we know, St. Patrick is now a hot spot for development in the country as well. And so we would love to have a part 2 where these players are also involved in the conversation. So I will get to the entire panel here, and I will give each and every one of you an opportunity for closing comments. Where do we go from here? Fayed, I will start with you.
A hot seat right out the gate.
Yes.
I'm going to keep it brief and say that the citizenry of Grenada, and really any Caribbean island, should not shy away from politics. And actually, Jane and I had this conversation a while ago, and she's the one who helped me clarify this. So, Jane, I hope these aren't your closing remarks as well. But the citizenry should not shy away from politics, and that is the activities associated with the governance of their country and of themselves. So it is easy and a common practice for those who feel like they are being targeted to say that a person who is speaking out about a particular issue is, playing for the other side or simply protesting their governance or their point of view. And I think it's important that we stop looking at it that way and recognize that citizens should be involved in politics. politics is non-partisan. Politics is not about one party or the other. It is about having a voice and feeling the need, the duty, and the ability to raise that voice in how you are governed, in how your lands and your children's heritage is being treated with and made available for generations to come.
Jane?
Excellent point, Faye. Luckily not the one that I wanted to make. No, I would actually like to give a shout out to the tourism sector here in Grenada. Because we've been framing the discussion very critical of large tourism developments, and I've worked in the tourism sector for quite a few years, and I know so many astounding people there who work very hard, who have these issues in mind, who understand what sustainability is about, and have been trying very hard to protect the pure Grenada brand in order to keep sustainability, our natural heritage, our people at the center of how we do this kind of sector. But I want to broaden it out as well. It's not just about tourism development, it's about development in general. How do we want to see Grenada progress in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? We have these national sustainable development goals, and they're very important. They make sense. Maybe we need to break it down and make it more simple. But the point really is that in order to prosper, we need to maintain our ecosystem services. They're vulnerable, they're sensitive. And if we build one big hotel there, another one over there, another one over there, and more than that, we just cut down here and there for any kind of development without any practice of how are we going to sustainably use our resources, we will lose what makes Grenada special. We will lose what makes us as a people special. We will lose essentially our identity to some extent. And we may not identify with the little pricker bush down on the peninsula, but those things, they do matter. Maybe not just one patch, but collectively, because it's a system. And I keep thinking of it as a body, you know? Okay, we debush, we clip our nails because they need a little bit of trimming. We take down a mangrove, we take down a piece of our kidney, which we need to filtrate the waters to keep, you know, the fish stocks healthy. We take down the trees, we take a bit of our lungs, so we can't breathe anymore, right? So every action ultimately contributes to a larger system. And so we need to think mindfully about how do we develop. It doesn't mean we can't develop, it just means that we have to develop with sustainable practices in mind. And that is possible. That is totally possible. We can do that. So I don't want to go back to a plantation mindset as I see people saying. I want to let us move forward and look at how can we do development in a constructive way with people, with developers, with the government in collaboration, because it's possible. We can do better. And I think we should.
Okay.
Travis, please proceed. Yes.
So personally, for me, I am advocating for the use of a ecosystem-based adaptation model in terms of how we treat our sustainable tourism development, because it's so linked to the environment. And the ecosystem-based adaptation model basically speaks to the importance of getting the local communities involved in the decision-making process, ensuring that whatever development that takes place within their spaces are to their ultimate benefit. And this is critical because we have to ensure that more Caribbean nationals benefit from the tourism value chain. And we have to ensure that we pivot everything on our education sector and to ensure that it is an essential part of our school curriculums, so we can shape the attitudes of persons generally to be more environmental conscious. And I think if we can achieve this, then naturally we will ensure that the organizations that have the responsibility for providing oversight to all sectors and the environment are held accountable to what they are doing. Because the policies are there now. But the issue is enforcement, the issue is regulation, and the issue is we allow too many things to slide. If we develop a more environmental conscious society through education, then I think the natural course of action will be for more persons to participate in the process to ensure the outcome that will best benefit our locals and our region on a whole.
Atherton, you have been sitting there in the wind, and I'm going to give you a chance to wrap up here. I was telling privately my friend Margaret that we need to have you back on the Bub Report, Athi. So I would give you a chance to put a bow on everything we have been discussing this morning.
First of all, let me say how happy I am and how optimistic I feel listening to so many younger voices, who have accepted and embraced the challenge of protecting and nurturing our Caribbean region. That makes me feel really, really happy. 48 years ago, I started my work on national and regional and global environmental issues. And thank you, Bob, for actually enveloping me with this younger person. I just turned 75, so I am happy to see I can cross over, knowing that the business of protecting the Caribbean is in good hands. But a couple of the bullet points. Maybe it is time to drop this word development, because the DE is the prefix of so many negative words like devil, death, deny, destroy. Maybe what we should be talking about is something that more accurately reflects what Fayan and all the others have been saying. The need for us all to get engaged. The need for us all to become enveloped. So how about you guys proposing to whoever you need to propose it, that instead of development, we are about envelopment. ENVELOPEMENT. Because you're going to envelope everybody big enough. And you're not destroying anything. You're not deviling anything. You're enveloping everything. So that's your task. A new word for the Caribbean contribution to the global discussion on sustainable development. The other point is, I'm sitting here on a 4-acre property in Dominica. It's 4 acres of land that my wife and I developed 25 years ago into a small resort. We have 33 Caribbean fruit trees, tropical fruit trees planted on this farm, which are fruit trees that have been disappearing. So we've created, if you will, a germplasm bank of exotics that used to be quite common when I was a child, but actually have been disappearing as a result of monocrop banana production, uncontrolled housing and road construction throughout. So, and we've been here for 25 years. And we are 400 meters above sea level, looking over the Caribbean, breathing clean, fresh air, which is one of the most important elements of a Caribbean vacation. People come here and they say, my God, I haven't breathed so deeply since when? And they feel better. They are better. And in this age of pandemics and viral infections, how do you place a value on clean air? How do you place a value on highly oxygenated air? Because I'm surrounded by trees. The forest is right here. I could reach out and touch trees from where I'm sitting. So the tourism we're looking for and the envelopment process we're seeking to promote is one that automatically, includes, values, nurtures, cares for, and teaches people how to manage those systems like clean air. What about water? Most of the English-speaking Caribbean is running out of water. Many to the north of us have run out of water. How do you do tourism without water? Do you do reverse osmosis and desal plants when you are polluting the very coastal waters with your sewage that you want to desal in order to create drinking water? Come on. There's an anomaly there. There's a problem in that mix. How do we create a newly designed thought process that allows people to see systems and a systems approach, just as nature does, an ecosystems approach, an integrated approach? That's the second point. The third point is this. The current structure of decision making at the policy making level, at the financial level, etc., is not designed or able to accommodate an integrated approach to envelopment. A bank does not bring to the table the key people who understand tourism or manufacturing or housing. No, they hire bureaucrats or highly trained technical professionals to make decisions about a sector that they know nothing about. They know nothing about it. And there they are making decisions about who gets loans, under what terms and conditions, etc., etc. So a redesign of the decision-making process to accommodate the notion of consultation and full engagement, not just, consultation so you can check the box and say you had a consultation. Consultation so you can get meaningful redesign, meaningful reshaping of the model that we're going to be using for our envelopment. And so it is for the policymakers, the financial people to take that on board as well. And finally, Mr. Bob, it is this. We have a mistaken notion that we have to disabuse ourselves of. When you hear the term investor, don't you immediately think blonde hair, blue eyes, white skin? But
or someone from the global north,
But guess who? Yes, guess who are the major investors in our respective economies? We are. We are both financially in terms of tax paying, in terms of look around you and ask yourself, who has taken loans to build restaurants, to do buses, to build housing? We are our biggest investors, and yet we get a loan at 10.5%, and we give those foreigners like range our passports to go and sell, and they keep the money interest-free. It's not a loan. We give them millions of dollars while we're requiring local investors to go to the bank and pay 10.5%. It is time for us to revisit, rethink what an investor is, what a tourist is. Dominica is the only island that has had a high level of dependence on Caribbean visitors. 57% of our stayover visitors up until 10 years ago came from the Caribbean. And so a rethinking is necessary, a revisiting of the work of people like Beckford is necessary, and a reshaping of our approach to planning, our approach to decision-making, and yes, our approach to politics. So that politics cannot be somebody coming to promise to build a road. That's your job. When we come and promise, we're hiring you to look after the building of roads and schools. So why you come in? Because you're doing what we ask you to do, I must put you back there? Come on, people. So I am pleased. I am really happy and optimistic that the young women of the Caribbean and the young men of the Caribbean have embraced this mission, this task, and really are the next wave of warriors for the Caribbean, which is what we need, because this is a war in which we are engaged. We are engaged in a battle to save our region for our children and grandchildren. And if we don't engage it like that, if we don't mobilize and practice and train up ourselves so that we can last the distance, we could very well be the last real Caribbean generation. And I know none of us want us to be that. We want to be like our dear friend, the doctor from Grenada. We want to be around to see the great grands, love, live, and be well in this Caribbean. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Mr. Martin, that was a sage perspective. This has been a very rich conversation today. And I really want to thank my producers for helping me to bring this quality of folks together that we see here this morning. And of course, as I said, this is what we attempt to do on the Bub Report, is to elevate the discourse and move beyond the superficial conversations that are sometimes had on these issues. And these conversations are not should not be seen as cyclical conversations, as news cycle type conversations, but these are conversations that should reflect the spirit of our time. And so I want to thank the panel for indulging with us today. And certainly viewers, as always, thank you for your continued viewership of the Bub Report. On that note, let me wish the Christian community around the Caribbean and around the world a happy Easter, a happy Holy Week season. And we will see you next week with another installment of the Bub Report. Thank you. Have a great week. Bye-bye.